Stories from Maine is a collection of true tales and legendary stories of daring, heroism, absurdity, disaster, and spectacle, all proving why many of the greatest legends in American history are our stories from Maine. In 1776, as North American colonial patriots fought to overthrow a tyrannical British superpower, two men of Maine stepped forward, risking their lives, their fortunes, and their sacred honor, to put forward one of the greatest documents in human history, one that was conceived in liberty, and became a worldwide model for self-determination. Stay with us and hear the true tale of two men, two signatures, and the Declaration of Independence, next, on this all-new star-spangled episode of Stories from Maine. Our podcast begins right now.
This is our all-new Stories from Maine weekly podcast episode for July 4, 2025. Stories from Maine is authored by historian Lori Suzanne Dell. Her books, Stories from Maine and Stories from Maine 2, as well as all of her books, are available through book retailers and can be found on Amazon. And you can follow our weekly Stories from Maine articles each Friday in the Brunswick, Maine newspaper, The Times Record. You can follow us on Facebook, YouTube, and Instagram at Stories from Maine. You can also email us at storiesfrommaine@gmail.com.
On this 4th of July weekend, as the United States of America celebrates its 249th birthday, we take a look back at two men from Maine whose signatures appear on one of the most famous documents in human history. Now, let's head on over to Oscar for the true story of two men, two signatures, and the Declaration of Independence.
On September 5th of 1774, representatives of 13 British colonies in North America gathered at Carpenter's Hall in Philadelphia. There, they addressed a serious problem, one which the British government had created back in England. These men met to discuss what is known as the Intolerable Acts, a series of taxes, duties, restrictions, and burdensome costs that were forced solely upon the loyal North American subjects of King George III in an attempt to raise monies for a cash-strapped British treasury. These new taxes were placed on every sort of import to the colonies, and on exports, which included sugar, tea, glass, lead, paper, paint, and many other staples needed by the colonies in order to live, thrive, and work. And the Quartering Act of 1765 required colonists to house British soldiers in their private homes, thus giving the monarchy greater control over each individual in the faraway colonies of North America. By 1773, the colonists had had enough. In Boston, revolutionaries, known as the Sons of Liberty, dressed as Native Americans and forcefully boarded a cargo ship of the British East India Company that was moored in the harbor. These marauders then dumped the ship's cargo of tea and other supplies into the harbor, thus causing a great financial loss for the East India Company, who had a great control over the New England colonies. Back in England, King George, realizing that the colonies of North America were in revolt, sent troops to New England to take hold of the colonies, and Parliament passed what is known as the Coercive Act to punish these revolting insurgents. To form a diplomatic response, the colonies, seeking to speak with one united voice, sent their representatives to Philadelphia to discuss how to handle this tyrannical insult to colonial liberty. There, in the hot city, men such as George Washington, Thomas Jefferson, and Benjamin Franklin were joined by men such as Samuel Adams, John Adams, and dozens of other men, all representing the British colonies of North America. Among these men was William Whipple of Kittery, in the Massachusetts Bay Colony's province of Maine. Born in Kittery on January 25th of 1731, Whipple was born and raised in Maine, and he would grow to become an educated man who worked as a sea captain and was also a merchant of goods. Being on the border between the Massachusetts province of Maine and what would become the state of New Hampshire, Whipple took part in many political events in New Hampshire. By 1775, Whipple had become a member of the New Hampshire Provincial Congress. Later that year, Whipple was sent to Philadelphia to represent New Hampshire in the First Continental Congress. In July, the Second Continental Congress sought peace with King George and dispatched the Olive Branch Petition to lower the temperature on both sides of the growing animosities. But King George refused to read the petition. By the spring of 1775, the Battle of Lexington and Concord pitted professional British troops against the ordinary citizens of the colonies, thus sparking the American Revolution. And by August of 1775, the British government had issued a proclamation of rebellion, declaring the British colonies of North America to be in full revolt. By October of 1775, the mighty fist of Great Britain was pounding on the colonies of North America. The bombing of Falmouth, now the city of Portland, Maine, was quickly followed by the first naval engagement, known today as the Battle of Machias. And nearly every colony was being attacked by Britain's military might and occupied by troops loyal to King George. Meanwhile, the colonial representatives of the colonies could see they had little choice open to them. Either the colonies would have to surrender and submit to the punishment of the British Crown, or completely separate and become a free, independent, and sovereign nation unto itself. By the summer of 1776, all of the details were nearly worked out. Although much of the political wrangling was still ongoing, the colonial revolt was moving ahead. As one man, Patrick Henry of Virginia, had put it, "Give me liberty, or give me death," which seemed the only option left to these men. On July of 1776, the final draft of a document penned by Thomas Jefferson gathered all of the facts and information submitted by all of the men of the Continental Congress. With the help of John Adams and Benjamin Franklin, Jefferson was able to weave all of the opinions of the Congress into one flowing document of text, which laid out the causes and grievances of the colonists into a narrative with a flowing flare of brilliance. This Declaration of Independence announced the dissolution of British rule in the colonies, announced the formation of 13 separate and free states, all united in a common cause. The document was then signed by every representative member of the Congress, including Kittery's own, William Whipple. But transportation back in those days was a long and difficult affair, and not every member of the Congress was in town when the Declaration of Independence was ready for signature. And with the battles of the American Revolution underway all across the eastern coast, getting from one portion of the new nation to the other was a very difficult and dangerous task. Although the Declaration of Independence was official and read out to every colony in North America, and was now the law of the land, many of the members of the Continental Congress were still traveling into Philadelphia to sign the document. And one of those men was another man of Maine, Matthew Thornton. We'll be right back.
Our Stories from Maine podcast streams new episodes each Saturday, exclusively on our YouTube channel. So please, take a moment to like, share, comment, and subscribe to us on YouTube, and return each week for another episode of our Stories from Maine. And please follow us on our Facebook page with nearly 41,000 followers, where we post new Maine content each day. And we would love to hear from you. You can email us at storiesfrommaine@gmail.com.
Now, let's get back to Oscar for the conclusion of our feature story, Two Men, Two Signatures, and the Declaration of Independence.
While the American Revolution saw American volunteers pitted against the might of professional British troops on the soil of North America and in the waters off the coastline of the new United States of America, the founding fathers of this new and independent nation were still arriving at Philadelphia to affix their signatures to America's birth certificate. And one of those men was Matthew Thornton. Matthew Thornton was born in Lisburn, County Antrim, in Ireland on March 3rd of 1714, to Scotch-Irish parents James and Elizabeth Jenkins Thornton. Within 3 years, the Thornton family immigrated to New England as part of a Scotch-Irish immigration group that landed in the Sheepscot area, near present-day Wiscasset. The Thorntons settled near the head of McCoy Bay, a little north of the creek near James Dunning, and they began a farm on Lot 46, on what is now the Rossmore Road, on the periphery of the newly named colony at Brunswick. There, the Thorntons raised their 4 children, farmed the land, and built their log cabin home. On July 13th of 1722, approximately 60 Indians from Norridgewock landed on the shore of Merry Meeting Bay, seeking revenge from an attack on their settlement the previous year. These Indians made an attack upon the settlement of Brunswick, which they set fire to and entirely destroyed. In the attack, these Indians killed cattle, and several citizens were taken prisoner, and some settlers were cruelly murdered, their houses rifled and burned. When Matthew was 8 years old, he and his father returned from Falmouth, now known as Portland, where they sought provisions for their family. As they arrived at the shoreline of McCoy Bay, they could see that the little settlement of Brunswick was burning. With the approach of the Indians, Mr. Thornton and his family were forced to flee, leaving their home and all of their possessions. The Thorntons reached the McCoy shore and completed their escape in a canoe across Casco Bay. As the Thorntons fled for their lives, they could see the flames which were devouring their home. It is unknown if the Thorntons ever returned to Brunswick, but by 1730 James Thornton's name first appears in the town records of Worcester in Massachusetts. There, in Worcester, young Matthew was educated at the Worcester Academy and later became a physician and surgeon who settled at Londonderry, New Hampshire. There, Matthew became one of the leading citizens of New Hampshire. Matthew served in the colonial militia and became the president of the New Hampshire Provincial Congress, and he was president of a 5-man committee which drafted the state constitution of New Hampshire. Thornton was then elected as a member of the Continental Congress, but Thornton couldn't reach Philadelphia to take his seat until the 4th of November 1776. At that time, he affixed his signature to the Declaration of Independence, the last member of America's founding fathers to do so. And thus, the story of Maine's 2 founding fathers of the United States, their 2 signatures, and America's Declaration of Independence is forever etched into the legend of the United States of America and are forever remembered in the annals of our Stories from Maine.
We hope you have enjoyed our feature story of 2 men of Maine, 2 signatures, and the Declaration of Independence. Please join us again next Saturday for another, all-new, weekly episode of our Stories from Maine and learn why many of the greatest legends in American history are our stories from Maine. Have a happy and safe 4th of July weekend. Thanks for listening.
Our weekly Stories from Maine article, published in the Brunswick, Maine newspaper, The Times Record, can be found on newsstands each Friday and can be viewed online. The Stories from Maine logos are a registered trademark of Laurie Suzanne Dell, and all original content is copyright 2025, with all rights reserved. Please come back next Saturday for another all-new episode of Stories from Maine.